Everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have our session today and talking about kind of the journey of data literacy here at Goodyear. So I think as we're getting started, certainly feel free to scoot forward if you want. And we've got a small room, so the closer we can get to you as we're talking, all the better. Today we're joined by both my partner in crime, DeAnna Hanzel, is out right now with bronchitis, but she will be joining us online, so I'm going to wave virtually at her, and hopefully that she's in the Zoom session. And then joined by two of our professors and partners in crime from CASE. I don't know if you gentlemen would like to introduce yourselves.
I'm Jagdip Singh in the area of marketing in the School of Management.
I'm Vipin Chaudhary. I'm computer science and computer and data science. Use the mic, please.
Oh, the mic. All right, so we've taken care of our quick admin items and our very brief introduction, and we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm going to set kind of the stage for, what it means for, digital literacy at Goodyear. This is something that's near and dear to our heart for Goodyear. So, the future for the mobility industry is for us, and we've said this many times, around fleets, autonomous, connected, and electric vehicles. And really, Goodyear, if you're not aware, in addition to blimps, we sell a lot of tires, and we love tires. The reality is tires are changing. And if we really think about, EVs, so EVs are heavier. It's a whole different wear model on the tires and how they're handled. More and more vehicles are connected. And so if you think about it, there's a lot more need for services. So everyone here loves their Amazon Prime. They love getting their stuff on time and in full and within a couple hours or within a day or two. And keeping fleets up and running, commercial fleets, is very complex. And so for us, we really view Goodyear as part of this mobility ecosystem. And for us, it's really connecting the tire and the vehicle, to the road and to all our services. So Goodyear, in addition to selling tires, offers a lot of services for fleets and for companies that are really a powerful enabler in the marketplace. So for us, digital transformation is critical. For us, even modeling new tire architectures. So one of the things that we've done recently with our OEMs is virtual tire design. So we have vehicle simulators, fully fledged, 6 degrees of freedom, giant vehicle chassis that actually simulate the vehicle platform and the tire itself. So for us, a great opportunity to take clock cycles out and iterations out of our design process and bring award-winning designs to the marketplace earlier. The other thing is market demand. So certainly we've seen a lot of supply chain disruption in the current world today. But for us, really understanding, instead of a traditional manufacturing model of, the old saying was round and back and out the back. We would push tires into the marketplace. We would just flog them in the market, get them to wholesalers. And really, we're trying to pivot to be more demand-driven so that we're really getting a much more market-back view to our tire demand and what we can win in the marketplace. And so across the bottom are a number of examples of why digital is so critical to Goodyear, and more importantly, why data is so critical. So I talked a little about iteration reduction, our technology bold goals. For us, this is taking iterations out of our tire design process. Now, each iteration is a considerable amount of money. It's money for the OEMs, and it's money for us in creating those tires. Data lakes and Industry 4.0. So I talked about fleets and intelligent tires. Well, these tires are sending signals continuously up into our data lakes. We're collecting this information, we're putting algorithms against it, and predicting tire services. So another critical area where you have just a volume of data. When you think about our manufacturing footprint, so Cooper last year purchased Cooper Tire, so we've further grown our industrial footprint. And anyone in the manufacturing space appreciates all the signals that come off your manufacturing equipment and how that creates a huge opportunity to optimize your manufacturing processes. I talked about the intelligent tires and signals. We talked about the virtual designs and the iterations and the market signals and demand. So across all 5 of those areas, one thing that we've seen across Goodyear is, man, we got a lot of data. A lot of data. A lot of data sitting in silos, a lot of data that's maybe has poor metadata. And most of the time when you describe metadata and master data, we usually see leaders' eyes glaze over. Like, well, let me tell you why it's so important we have this good master data. And they're like, I'm like, no. And what's interesting is we're watching the organization really start to appreciate it. Oddly enough, as we're in the midst of integrating the North American Cooper SAP instance with ours. So not going to bore you with it, but talk about a lot of master data to get customers that are Goodyear customers and Cooper customers matched together. And so the whole organization is really appreciating how important it is to have good master data. The data discovery, understanding across all these sources of information, not recreating the wheel, recreating the same data stores and trying to make it so it's more accessible to across the organization. So what we've noticed as we've been doing this is we have all these pockets, all these great teams and groups that are working on things, oftentimes in pockets in isolation, but for us, we have all these people that know the Goodyear business so very well. And sometimes they don't always fully appreciate the art of what is possible. And so for us, the challenge, we have this listed out below, is, how do we upskill our associates? How do we expose them to new concepts and approaches on better leveraging digital platforms, technology, and data to really just kind of transform our organization? Because it's all sitting there. We just have to leverage it. So, this is going to lead a little bit into how we've approached our training program and what we're in the midst of designing with CASE, which is why we're here. So I'll move on to the next slide. So when you think about a digital transformation, there is a lot of places that you could delve into. And for us, what we decided was centering around the analytics side. And I think twofold. One, because we have so many data sources and such opportunity, we really want to leverage and expose that, the sooner the better. And so for us, that was the easy button to go after. But certainly there's a lot there, we'll say, in their traditional software engineering practices. And we do a lot in DevOps. But for us, we said across our processes, technology, and people, centered around data and how do we better leverage and harvest the data we have, we looked at these three areas. And so we spent probably last year. So it's been a journey. And DeAnna, who is virtually on with us, hopefully, hello DeAnna, we narrowed in with the IT leadership team in a series of conversations and with our associates around three areas that we really want to strengthen. And the first is data acumen. So data engineering, in fact, when I first came into Goodyear, I started in our enterprise data warehouse. And so I think, as a separate topic, anyone who gets into the IT field, I think understanding data, understanding analytics, knowing how to structure a good SQL statement is really valuable because it helps you appreciate and understand an organization. So you're really understanding how to go in and have good quality data, how to collect the data, transform it, and leverage it. And all the means of doing it falls under that concept of data acumen because we've got a lot of it laying around. The next is analytical acumen. So our point here is we love our spreadsheets. I'm sure every company still loves Excel. We had one individual, I remember this, when Excel went from 64,000 rows to like 1 million. He's like, I don't even know why we need a data warehouse anymore. He still did. And for us, it really is exposing people to leveraging AI and machine learning, more advanced concepts for statistics and analysis, and understanding even the process of quantitative and qualitative analysis. Because sometimes, and we love a good story, every organization, if you have a good storyteller, they can influence a lot of decisions. But really, it's far more powerful if you have fact-driven decisions. And being able to tease that out and tell that story is really important. And then the digital acumen, the world is changing so quickly, and so it was really exciting as we're going through the Cooper integration. We're seeing some of the, we're more alike than we're different, but we're also seeing different ways that they've approached analytics. And so for us, it's really having an open view to all the approaches and the techniques that are out there and available. So we said, hey, listen, we really want to drive across all three of these things. And Goodyear, I'm sure similar to many companies here, you have plans for your associates to develop. We have our individual development plans. Every year you sit down, you go, what are you going to do? How are you going to succeed at it? And we have plenty of great online courses. So, whether LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, but we found in a lot of those cases, they're very much point in time and they're not connected across what we'll say is this three dimensions that we really wanted our associates to be successful with. So for us, we said, hey, how do we build this out a little further? And this gets us to the journey we want our associates to get to. And today we'll ultimately talk about what is the far right, which is the Data Champion program. So this is just a teaser to it. But the thought was, how do we uplift our associates collectively in a series of steps? And really the tip of the spear for us is those data champions. So I think at one of the other tables, we were talking about change agents and how do you drive success. And so for us was building out this program, and I'll expand those here in just a minute. But to the right, I wanted to share something that I thought was valuable. So we've built out a competency model for our IT associates. And you can see here, the outer perimeter represents, we'll say, the core behaviors that Goodyear, we want our associates to adhere to and be successful. Delivering results, acting with integrity, protecting our good name, energizing the team, being great partners, promoting collaboration, and being agile. So again, that's an important part of Goodyear as a whole, and we're all rated at those things. Now for us with IT, we had who we are, our technology, and our principles and process. And I won't go into all those, but I mean, at its simplest, one of our key goals in IT is to be a trusted technology advisor, is so that our partners in the functions and in the businesses know and trust us because we're bringing and we understand what they're trying to accomplish. So for us, one of the things that we saw as an opportunity and where we wanted to focus is over on the right. So under technology, data architecture and digital enablement. So this is why we're really focusing on kind of this, data literacy program, because we feel like across Goodyear, the most common theme, the most common opportunity we see is unleashing all the data we have. How do we do it ourselves? How do we enable our peers to do it? And how do we uplift our associates across the organization? So drilling into it, so I showed you those 4 little icons on the left. I'm going to drill in a little further. So on the left, we have kind of the first steps, and these things are this leverages a lot of the existing material that's out there. So we have data aware and data capable. And really, this is a framework that leverages your standard courses. We're kind of weeding through and picking out we think are the best available courses that fit people to leverage, so we can kind of guide people. It's more of a curated program. To the right is data leadership. And the thought here is it's not everybody. This is probably people where they're in contact with leaders or they're interfacing with the sets of data and the strategic initiatives that really need a higher level of familiarity with data literacy and those concepts we just talked about. And what's most interesting, what I'll say is, so you have the Data Maven, which is still kind of a small group-based program. And then to the far right, we really started looking at this concept of the data champion track. And this is truly the tip of the spear. These are the people that are the change agents that we really want to invest a lot of time. And so to the right, you can see here, we had 100 to 120 hours over the course of a year. So if you think about the time that you're asking as an organization to commit people to, it's sizable. That's some serious time, and it's really exciting. And our thought was, again, going back to why we want to do it with CASE, and you can see, here's CASE, is while we tried rolling our own, building up our own course selections and everything else, it just never fit well together. You could kind of piece some of it together and get some good blocks, and that's where we see some of the everyday data elements coming into. But to really say we want a thoughtful program that stitches together the best of academia and then influenced by what we're looking for, it really led to this very collaborative series of sessions that we're having with CASE. And Goodyear and CASE have had a long-standing relationship. So, I mean, this is something that I think just came up. Jagdip, Yeah, so it's been 7-8 years. So it's been a number of years and in a variety of areas. And it's been such a fruitful relationship that it just felt natural that we wanted to explore this capability. So let's talk about where we're at. So, I think what I can talk about is how the sausage is being made. I can't tell about how good the final dish is going to be. It's going to be served. We're going to be launching this next year. So actually, at the end of this month, we have our Global IT Leadership Town Hall. We're actually talking about this program and really giving the criteria to our IT associates. So we've got 1,000 plus associates, and the framework for them to enroll in this program. And then this stuff will start in February and go through the balance of next year. But I think what's been exciting is the collaboration sessions. And so while this is starting within the IT organization, when we've had these sessions, we've had a leader from data science, we've had leaders from our sales and marketing organization, from our training, our learning and development organization, HR. So it's been a very cross-functional team working with the professors here and some other individuals and really framing up what was our journey intended to be and what kind of courses. So CASE has a wonderful selection of professors and topics that they've covered. How did we mesh all this together? And so to your right, you can see up in the images, we had a lot of the whiteboarding sessions, the brainstorming, what were the key themes and what we wanted to expose. And then more recently, 2 weeks ago, Case came back with a much more detailed kind of next layer down of what that's going to be. And that got very exciting because now you're getting into the more tangible sets of what we want to solve for and what we want to accomplish. So for us, it was really getting into the weeds of these specific topics. Do we want to tinker with the amount of hours on this subject or the other? How important is understanding, data privacy versus analytics or the ethics of AI? And honestly, you'd say, well, I don't have to worry about that. But when you start thinking about Goodyear as a global company, the information we do that touches consumers and their vehicles, you start touching on the privacy of data. You start understanding that you may be able to capture the driving behaviors of individuals. How do you anonymize that? How do you retain the value of the service without exposing the individual? So for us, it was one of those things you're like, well, that is more important than I maybe first appreciated. And this is the value of kind of the collaboration that we've had. So, what I wanted to do is take a few minutes, I guess I took a few more minutes, in just talking about and setting the stage for how we were approaching this case. And now I'll hand it over to Jagdip to kind of take the rest of the story.
Thank you, John. Hey, hello, everyone. As John mentioned, our goal was to be collaborative and discover a way to do what he wanted the organization to do, which is to create mastery for these data champions. So the idea was, let's focus on this group of people. And the challenge they put for us is how to get mastery in their executive team so be able to deliver on that goal. I think the goal is quite intuitive. It's how to get there. And most of our work with Goodyear and on the campus has been to develop this original content. Not everything is original, but a lot of it is original content, which is tailored to this challenge. And I will present today the framework that we have developed to create that content. I didn't want to get into the weeds about the content itself, although we did discuss it when we went to Goodyear. But I'm happy to talk more and explain how what pathways we developed. So let's look at the framework and invite your comments, suggestions, and challenges as you may be also thinking of a framework to enable the executive team, the associates in your own organization. So to achieve that, we thought the first starting point is to have a collaboration on Case Campus. And we do have two programs that approach the idea of analytics and data science from two different perspectives. I from the School of Management, where business analytics is the more dominant way of doing things, which is on the left-hand side, and in the computer science area, which is more data science driven. And Vipin is a chair of that department. And I and Vipin didn't know each other on the campus till we started collaborating on this pathway. So you can see how silos replicate themselves everywhere. So we began to collaborate and see how can we partner to create this program. I'll talk a little bit about the left-hand side, what's unique about our program. Many of our graduates do go to different areas within a business. They're trained in supply chain and marketing within the program. There's some students here from the program as well. But they are very broad in terms of their skill base. And I want to say a few words on that. And then I'll ask Vipin to talk about the right-hand side, which is the data science, and see how we put them together into one framework. So in our program, there are three blocks: business core, which is really understanding the nature of business problems. And as I said, to give it some focus, we take supply chain and marketing. One is very digital, the marketing side. Supply chain is very operations focused. And as you know, for organizations to be effective, these two things need to be connected. So that's how we created the program. The other block is the analytics core. That is a basic analytics tool. They're always changing to keep up with up to date in terms of the tools that are available in the marketplace. And then we bring the two things together in what I call the analytics action connection. That is, how do we go from analytics to action? And the missing glue is insight. Not everything out of the data is an insight. You have to figure out what is the insight. And you need to go back to the problem to understand what I was trying to discover, what does the result mean. As you know, 90% of times, most of the results are intuitive, so they're not worth reporting in a way. You have to search for that insight that is a counterintuitive idea and then can add to the nature of decisions you make. So I think we focus a lot of that. And that's how in our program we begin to collaborate with companies like Goodyear, because I think the future of analytics is an academic practice collaboration. The problems exist in the real world and they're constantly changing. The tools are always advanced, I think, in the academic world, but now I see more and more collaboration on that too. Many PhDs are going into the practitioner world and they're coming back to school to bring all those new advances. And I think there's a nice collaborative at that front too. But how to bring these partners, we have over 70 partners in the program, to bring their problems and their way of thinking to give opportunities for students to apply these tools so that they can sharpen their understanding of this analytics to action connection. So I think we focus a lot on that. And some of the students who go on the real world, they are equipped to and train the mindset to think of problems like that. So that's our program. We've been doing it for almost 6 years now. And we have sharpened and refined this thinking. And then we said, well, let's go to computer science and see what they are doing. So you want to talk about computer science a bit? The program. No, you go ahead.
The program. Yeah, so some of you may not be aware, but the computer and data science program is the largest program on campus. I think we beat out biology last year, and we are growing. Data science is growing. It's growing exponentially. So we have close to 900 students currently, and it is growing. The computer science program per se, in terms of the students graduating, they all get, I don't know how many jobs a year prior to their graduation. So it's excellent in terms of where the students go. Data science and computer science, I'll give my perspective later on what the difference is between data science and computer science. The way we look at it is a slightly different way than how Jagdip looks at it or business school look at it. But we are growing a lot in the areas of AI and machine learning, as you would expect, which is becoming the core of data science in terms of how do you predict things, or the analysis which couldn't be done so easily with various kinds of data. Right? So today the data is not just one kind of data from a machine. You have data of very different kinds. You may have images, you'll have audio, you'll have continuous data, you would have categorical data, and the data is large. It will be hundreds of terabytes to hundreds of petabytes. To me, large data is in petabytes, but that's not always the case. It's the heterogeneity of data and how you get insights from there. That's quite non-trivial. And so from a computer science perspective, we develop tools to be able to combine all this, which can help the business managers to make decisions, right? So we don't provide the insights, but we give you the means of deriving that insight.
You can see already the gap that needs to be filled. We can do the tools, we do the analytics, but the insight still remains a gap, hard to find that. So I think that's a tool challenge for data champions because that's what they thrive on. And our framework began with, how it is as an overall framework, it has to be clean, it has to have very focused attention. And we came to this two-dimensional thinking that data champions should have mastery of. And I call that logic and action. On the logic side, I think this is pretty intuitive now. That is, we need a mastery of data science. And that's why we want to computer science to say we need to figure out how to develop the tools now, not just the mindset, the tools for data-driven decision making that is not so intense, but the right level of difficulty, if you will, and implementation so it can be executed. And the idea there is to enable innovation and change based on novel insights extracted from data using analytics. And because insights are grounded in problems, champions have to develop their sensibilities beyond the tools. And the underlying foundation of that is statistical reasoning. I think we came to the understanding that you really can't achieve the goals of champions without them having a foundation in statistical reasoning. And that's what I call logic. It's very hard because to go back to that kind of thinking for executives who have a lot of experience, this takes effort, and we have been building a pathway to do that. So that's one dimension. The second is just because you found insight doesn't mean you can lead change. One does not easily lead to the second. So we said leading change requires persuasive storytelling that weaves the insights and powerful visualizations in a compelling narrative. And the last part is the most important: motivate others to act. So insights which stay with you in an organization are not very helpful. We need to distribute and motivate. And that's a mastery of storytelling. And we call that message resonance. The message resonates with the audience. It fits into their schema. It gives them a new way of thinking. And then they naturally are motivated to act. And that's the storytelling. Again, both of them are well-developed foundations in the literature. And we begin to see how we can bring together. I call the second dimension action. And as we begin to dig into it, we found that these two dimensions are highly correlated. People who are good at one tend to be not so good at the other. And that's another challenge, how to fuse these two non-naturally correlated masteries within one person. So in order to develop our thinking and to identify the goal, we play this 2x2 design to set the boundaries of what our program should create and should not create. So this idea of don't go into that side, let's focus on this side. And you can see the two dimensions are logic and action, which I call insight quality, low or high. And the action is persuasiveness, low or high. And we begin to study in the popular press and elsewhere, where are the organizations today on this journey? And what we found, as I think most of you would intuitively think of, most commonly observed is in the low quadrant. And I said there sound good stories. These stories sound good, but only to the leaders. That's the problem. It's not persuasive to others, but to the leader based on their experience, their thinking, their observations. They make a lot of sense. So these are good stories to the leader, but they don't resonate with the audience, and they often don't contain credible insights. So people may follow them in organizations, but not motivated internally. They're following it because they've been told to do so. And that's why many organizations, good ideas don't go very far, are not very effective, because the storytelling doesn't have that ingredient of persuasiveness for internal motivation. And this idea that many organizations are in this area, commonly observed, has led to a lot of consulting work to move organizations to this aspiration for many, where they can create sound good stories, which also resonate with the audience they're trying to speak to, maybe customers or employees, but they may not be based on real data. What I mean is you have instances, anecdotal. You can distill it down to one person in one situation doing something, but they don't have a ground truth in them, which an analytics person would say, yeah, that I think is a good insight. So they are very persuasive in the sense they resonate well. There's an art of storytelling, and if you're looking around, there's a lot of consultants who come in and give you all kinds of materials to help executives tell such stories. So it's aspiration for many. And this new quadrant is a new ground, which is on the high-low side. That is, organizations know that stories that sound good but are not based on data can mislead and waste resources and people's energies. So they're moving towards this a new ground, which is to create stories which are sound in their evidence, but they may not resonate very well. And I think you heard John speak about it, that when you speak to managers, senior executives about data and reams of outputs, they glaze over. They don't know what you're talking about because the skills needed to draw from it this persuasive knowledge is not that easy. So, and I said to you that these are not highly correlated dimensions, and that's the reason that when you become very good in the precision and the detail of analytics, it's hard to come out of it to give you a story that is compelling and only focuses on key details. So this is a new ground for many organizations now. They have to do this. They are putting a lot of resources in training people for data skills. I think data maven is one of those skills that you heard John talk about. Our students are also trained in this kind of thinking, a lot of analytical tools. They still have to be sharpened in terms of the insights which are persuasive, and that is the quadrant that we wanted to develop in this collaboration. And of course, as you can see, this is a rare place. It is not because people don't know that's where they want to be. I think most organizations know intuitively this is where we need to be, that we need to tell stories which are persuasive, but they have to be based on some evidence, because that is good for people, good for company, and we can be more effective in the implementation of it. So as I said to you, we had this 2x2 mostly to focus on what we will create and what we will not get into. So we don't want to be heavy data science in that sense. We need to fuse and blend them using ways that enable people to build for themselves. I think if you think of that kind of thinking. So that's the framing of our thinking. And as we begin to develop it, and Vipin will talk about how the data science piece is fused into it, and I will talk about the storytelling piece, because that's the piece I will be doing at Goodyear. As I begin to read, and I'm the director of the business analytics program, so my mind is usually on the analytics side, and storytelling is fun for me, I think, because in our research, that's what we do. But bringing it to practice is a challenge that I had to navigate to figure out how to manage that. And I think what I came to the idea was this challenges of diversity, which I say is establishing the common ground as a way to achieve that. So there, as you can see, there are two pathways to get to this rare. One is to come from people who are good at creating stories based on experiences which are persuasive, but may not have the skills of analytics to feed them, or those who can do a data analytics but cannot tell good stories. And when I show the two pathways, what I meant is to create a program of this kind, we need people from both sides present in the room. That's diversity is necessary to establish a common ground for skill building. So in other words, by having people who approach the evidence from different perspectives helps people develop skills to identify insights in the evidence and to weave it in a story that can be said in ways that is persuasive. So if you just take one side and train them, it may not be as effective as having diversity in the group. And that's why at Goodyear we were saying, let's get that diverse group of people in the room so that they can work together both individually and in teams as they work with experiential exercises to develop this rare focus that we want data champions to have. And then we developed I think it's 4 modules of the same kind of material, each layered on the top to achieve this objective. So that's a framework I thought you may find useful. I'm going to turn to Vipin to talk about the data science piece of it.
Thank you, Jagdip. Okay. So I'm going to give you some perspective on how data science has evolved. And some of you may agree with it, some of you will probably disagree with it, but that's the point. So data science, I mean, all the statisticians are original data scientists, right? Their whole job has been to take a lot of data and gather some statistics out of that. So that in the academia, the way data science evolved maybe a decade or so before was every domain which thought they could use data science would add some math and statistics, add some computer science, and they have their data science program. So in a university, typically you'll have many data science programs, everyone either offering a degree or a certificate, stacked certificates, and so on. So you have a multitude of these data science programs across. The problem with this is not everyone is an expert in math, statistics, or in computer science, and it's a very poor use of resources in the university. I'm trying to offer the same course, well, kind of the same course, in multiple different programs, and I don't have that much expertise there, and there's always shortage of staff. I would love to have more faculty from other departments come and teach in my department. Right? So what is happening now, and I think Case is sort of the leader in this, and Jagdip had put down that we are the first ABET accredited data science program in the world. Right? So most of the engineering programs are approved by this organization called ABET. Right? And it's a long, arduous process. So we say within computer science, because more and more the data science is becoming very compute oriented. And well, math and statistics is important, so we bring math and statistics into computer science. The domains need to be there, so our programs require that you have math and statistics, you have computing, and you also need to have some expertise in a domain, because you have to learn how to speak to people in that domain. The concept of storytelling, right, that has to be cultivated. So we ask students to pick a domain. And as you might expect, most of our students pick domains either in finance or biomedical engineering. So you get all those, and that is the data science program. Now, statistics is morphing quite a bit into this AI, machine learning, and then DL, which is the most popular form of machine learning, which is where you see a lot of nice results, is deep learning, right? So that becomes a core part of data science. So now with this framework, I'll talk about what a typical data science pipeline is and what is typically used in the industry. And then we'll talk about how we at Case, in partnership with Goodyear, have broken that up into certain modules so that they follow logically. And I'm not going to talk about the storytelling part, which is both at the beginning of the program, because you got to take the business problems, you got to articulate that, and then at the end, when you have the insights, you got to articulate that back to the business leaders. So the life cycle, you have to capture data, right? Different kinds of data, and there's lots of data. You want to find a way to keep that data, manage that data, and then you have to process that data, right? Depending on the type of data, the resources you may need are going to be huge. More and more people are moving towards using the cloud, for example, with all that data, because you're getting data from different geographies, and the cloud providers have built the backbone to just put that all together. And then you want to analyze that data, and finally you want to communicate that data, right? So instead of following this process of 5 or 6, and depending on who you talk to, and lots of consultants do this for a living, they might actually break this up into 20 different steps, right? I think there are 3 primary steps. First is the data management and cloud computing, right? So you capture the data, you got to manage that data somehow, right? You want to be able to, I don't know if you heard the term fairification of data, but fair is very important in a large organization, right? Whether you're doing it internally, you're cooperating with others, so you got to find the data. All the data that you gather, you have to find it. And the way to find it is maybe you need to put some metadata, describe the data, right? You probably want to have some identifiers to it which are persistent, right? The persistence could be within an organization. If you want to share with others or you want to share globally, then they have to be globally persistent. Then the A is for accessibility, right? You have all this data, you can find it, but then you can't access that data. Now, access involves a lot of intricate issues with cybersecurity, with privacy, and so on. So you want proper access control. You want to make sure the people who have access, who are authorized to access the data, do that, right? And then it needs to be interoperable, right? So you have one group in Michigan with all that data, and you want people in Cleveland to be able to use that data, right? So how do you make that interoperable? Interoperable more in terms of also data from a type of source to a different type of source, because you want to be able to use them together. Again, there are lots of issues there with metadata. You need to have standard protocols by which you can exchange that data. And then very, very useful, the reuse of that data, right? So again, metadata becomes very, very important in describing that. There are languages to do that. There are tools to do that, lots of different tools. So those aspects are going to be covered here. Now, because we are moving to cloud, what we thought, we need to talk about the basics of cloud computing. Because cloud computing is highly misunderstood. To me, it's a business model. It's not, oh, it is there in Amazon. Well, you can get any resource in Amazon, right? You have internal clouds too. It's the same thing, right? But what's becoming very interesting is you may have certain data which you don't want to put in a public cloud, right? Because for obvious cybersecurity reasons. So the strategy of hybrid clouds is very important, and that becomes very crucial in the way you manage your data, right? The privacy aspects become very important. Now, you also have lots of data which is unstructured. By unstructured, I mean non-tabular data. You have texts of data. You want to go and infer from that and create a table. So there are lots of machine learning tools. That's what has happened a lot in the last few years in computer science, to take this unstructured data and to create a structure out of that. And so there are lots of machine learning tools to do that. The goal is not to develop these techniques, but to be able to use these tools and the appropriate tools. And once you have all this data, you want to be able to visualize that, and that's where you start using some of this descriptive statistics. And here we are not trying to infer anything. It's just that, I have too much data to look in through an Excel spreadsheet. An Excel spreadsheet is usually not very large data. You'll have databases of data. So how do I use statistics in a way to, again, storytell? And statistics is going to reduce that data to some manageable form. You might get some averages, you might get some quartiles, and so on, right? But you want to go a step further. You want to be able to visualize that. So visualization of the data in the appropriate way is very important for convincing people, for doing the storytelling. everyone has seen pie charts, right? They're excellent for certain things. You can't use a pie chart for everything, right? So what kind of visualization mode that you need to represent a particular insight for someone, right? So designing effective dashboards, right? So we had a lot of discussion on what a dashboard should be, and it's going to be very domain specific as well. But you still want, if there's something which is very important and it happened very rarely, you have to find a different way of showing that in your dashboard. And then, of course, we are not going to stick to one tool. Everyone has their favorite tool, but you want to be able to give them insights on what is it that you want to use. But in this case, we will use certain tools because you got to implement it. And then once you've got all the data, you have the descriptive statistics, you also want to be able to predict from that, right? So eventually, all this data is useless unless I can derive something out of it, right? And that's where this machine learning comes in, right? So how do I derive certain conclusions? How do I predict that? So here the goal is to cover what are the different machine learning methods at a very high level, right? You might have heard of supervised learning, different types of learning modes. And the goal here is not to go into what is it that is happening inside that tool, but you still need to know what is the right tool to use, because you are going to use the results of that to make an important decision. If you don't know what is actually happening and what needs to be used, you're going to make a lot of errors. So that's sort of what is going to be discussed here. And today, it's very easy to use most of these tools on the cloud. You have a lot of this data, you have all these tools, you need a couple of statements of Python program written, which anyone, you don't even need to know much of that, and you can get amazing results, right? Now, in all of this, what I didn't talk about deeply was cybersecurity and privacy. Now, cybersecurity and privacy doesn't just come at the data level. It also comes at the model level. So I have this data and I want to learn something from that data and provide that information. Well, privacy is a major, major risk. Sometimes you might have data which is very private, but the insights that I make out of that will actually make the data or the person or whatever that privacy aspect is open. So I could have different knobs on how to control the privacy, right? Everyone will have different knobs so that I can actually get some insights. So we want to be able to talk about what are the various privacy solutions, and there are a whole bunch of them. And this is a very, very active area where lots of new tools, and a lot of it is actually still in research, but it's very quickly coming down, and that's where a lot of the ethical issues also come in. What dictates privacy? I mean, even the definition of privacy is quite hard, right? So you have to figure that out. And then, very importantly, the aspects of regulation, right? Every country has a different regulation to how you can use data, in what format, what you can do with that data, and so on. So all of those things are going to be covered. So to me, there are three components again: the data, then you have some visualization, and then you predict from that data. Okay. That's all I had. So I think we are open for questions, discussion.
Q&A. I don't know if DeAnna wants to answer or say a few words. Will you check with her?
Hey, DeAnna, can you hear us? And maybe you can speak up, hopefully. I'll check with Teams also.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, you sound like you're surviving.
I'm so sorry. I apologize for my voice.
Excellent. Yeah, so we have you here. You have any comments you want to add on what we shared thus far, and then we'll be ready to start some Q&A.
No, you guys did a fabulous job. I really appreciate you, the three of you, bringing this forward and sharing with others. It's been a great partnership with Case, and I'm so excited to get launching this in February and giving our associates an opportunity to learn about data and put this to good use in all the work that they're doing in their projects and problem solving.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, well, I think we'll be ready to start with some questions.
I see one already.
So again, great conversation. One of the things that I think, John, in the beginning you talked about was the data champions, which were data leaders, right? People who understand the data and are going to lead from the data. You also have the other side, which is you have our leaders that exist today that need to understand the data. And so how do you balance kind of getting that data aware level, but for your leadership, right? So what does data aware leadership look like versus data leadership? And how do you think about those two in your program?
So we were actually talking offline before this started about that, and there's two views, and one thing that we're really is encouraged at here at Goodyear is we have some senior leaders who have a lot of passion around the digital transformation of the organization, and have actually asked for personal sessions around topics like blockchain, augmented reality, AI and machine learning. And so I think what we have here is two intents. One is to create a more curated structure where we can have, we'll call these individuals interacting on key strategic projects and events where we can display these capabilities and bring them to bear on the initiatives that matter the most. In addition, there's kind of this ongoing, we'll say, shift within the leadership of a recognition that, when that one slide where it talked about, Goodyear shaping the mobility revolution, I didn't write that. This was one of our official statements, out to the shareholders. And so Goodyear recognizes this to be truly critical. And I think there is that other half of it, which is senior leaders recognizing and now asking for more of it. So it's nice to see that approaching from both the top and, we'll say, up from the ranks of the organization.
Sorry, one quick follow-up would be, the senior leaders, how are you coaching them to learn how
Can I add one comment to that?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So for the Data Champion program, if you go back to that 4-box that shows that there's two different approaches, and they talked a little bit about the diversity of the leaders, the facilitators who will be in the room are coming from both of those perspectives, and we will be modeling both of those ways of thinking throughout this program. The Data Maven track of the overarching program will help to address any initial gaps that need to be filled before they join the Data Champion track. So there will be some offerings on both the soft skill side and on the technical side that they can take advantage of leading up to the Data Champion launch. So that's from a L&D perspective, how I see that.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I guess the way I was thinking about it as well is how do you teach the leaders how to ask the right questions. We saw that when we started doing statistics, right? I have one leader in particular I used to work with who was learning about statistics and would always ask for a t-test. It didn't always apply, just like you said earlier, a pie chart's not always the right answer, but he knew that was at least a question to ask. And so, how do you think about coaching leaders to learn how to ask new questions?
No, I think the example I'll go to again is we have individual leaders that are now kind of coaching themselves as peers around the opportunities. So I think it's that recognition at the highest level of just how critical this digital transformation is for Goodyear. This is a much more curated and structured program that we're building out here. But what I'll say is you're already noticing a shift in kind of the language being used by a lot of leaders and the asks. So I think it is that approach from the top as well as, I'll say, growing up from the ranks in the organization.
I have a question specifically on cultivating the ability to deliver insights. Do you have some tools that you use in your program that have been very successful, or do you find there is a lot of case by case? And in addition to this question, do you find that certain individuals have a better ability to tell stories than others, or do you have tools that allow pretty much everybody to become better at driving insights?
So what I'll say is, name a tool, Goodyear probably has it in some way, shape, or form. And so I think in many cases, it's now we did actually, in our last workshop, we pointed out in tailoring something, so we have a lot of Tableau. We got Power BI, but we're a heavy Tableau shop, not a shock for a lot of people. It's a great platform, and it's a great tool for creating visualizations. But what we've also noticed is there are other cases where sometimes, a dashboard, while powerful or a good visualization, sometimes those insights, they're not intended for a human being. They're intended to feed an algorithm or to drive through an API layer actions elsewhere. And so I think, there's even this view of, I don't need to see a whole lot. I don't need to go digging for it. I need the key alert or other actionable item. And so I think for us, and this is why the Data Champion program is so important, is there is that upfront understanding of, if there's a saying, if the only tool you have in your tool belt is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And in this instance, a Data Champion shouldn't just jump back to the same tools we always use. It should be truly understanding what are we solving for and what are the ways. And if you have that wider perspective on technologies and capabilities and how to approach it, you can bring a lot more capabilities to bear to solving that challenge. So I think that's part of it, is we've got some wonderful enterprise scale tools, check all the boxes, but sometimes you have to even be able to willing to put all that aside to come up with something truly innovative and different. And that's part of the reason why we had the data science team, sales and marketing, everyone, very cross-functional group coming together and shaping this.
Maybe I can add a little bit to that. I think if I understood your question was, are there any tools that enable these champions or learners to identify insights or tell persuasive stories? Am I right? Or is it by case basis? Right. So I've been teaching this course for over 20 years for senior executives on learning to make decisions with data. And they ask me the same question: give me some rules, give me some tools. And I think the earlier question, what question should I be asking and I think when the problems are simple, there are plenty of tools. When they have clear yes and no answers, then asking for p-value or effect sizes or whatever that is could be possibly useful. But most problems of the real world at senior levels are not like that. And I often use a statement: insights don't lie in data. They require a blending of data, problem, and experience. Sometimes data tells you this is how you make money, and you say, no, I'm not going to do that. It's against our principles. So simply knowing what the data is saying doesn't give you the insight for action by itself. So for more complicated problems, it's a craft, I think. In my own feeling, it's a craft. You just don't know. You have this doubt every time. Did I get the right insight? Am I missing something? And to my sense, a doubt is good. Doubt is beautiful, because that's what makes us go on a path of discovery. The world is changing. Customers' interests are changing. Your data is old. You're feeling for the future. Nobody's making decisions for the past. But most data are about the past. So I have to look at that, think about the future, and make a decision that's going to be good for me in the future. There are no tools for that. It's a craft.
But there's a culture, though, that you
can
develop, right, around that.
Absolutely.
But culture, if it's made one person at a time, culture is not something that exists. It is in the grassroots.
I think that's where machine learning comes in. You learn from the past and you predict for the future.
I understand. But predictions of the future, which are full of uncertainties, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's what most managers are.
It doesn't always work.
Thank you.
I appreciate that this academy was put together with a cross-functional advisement. But it seems that the program is primarily centered around the IT professional and bringing them up into the data science capabilities. How about the domain experts? Are you thinking of taking them and pulling them into this academy and taking, for instance, the chemist and the R&D function at Goodyear that is interested in the digital world and making them a data scientist?
The answer is yes. And the reason we had these groups is, we're crawl, walk, run, and I would say we're at the wiggle stage. We want to eat the classic, we want to eat our own dog food. We want to test this out. But really, I would argue everything that we're laying out here is applicable to all those other groups. And we have I'd come from the R&D organization, had been there for a number of years. They're a very robust organization with excellent technical chops. They love to get into the weeds with these, and really, frankly, they would be all over this. So I think the way we're modeling it with those other groups is because we see it scalable beyond just us, just IT. It's just that we recognize, I think sometimes in IT you're in that unique place that you see the data, you see the systems, we have our eyes on a lot of those various pieces. And so we feel we want to help develop and grow our associates, but I think it is scalable beyond that. And I guess, DeAnna, maybe you want to add to your thoughts there on that?
I would also add that an outcome of the data champion cohorts will be that these individuals are going to serve as mentors and coaches to the future audience of cohorts. So we'll be pulling on our IT associates to serve as that coach and that kind of sounding board for individuals going through the program in the future. And we want that to be carried outside of IT eventually, but we want that expertise to come from in-house first.
Great, thanks.
Hi, thanks for the good talking. My question is, how do you track the change during the implementation of the program, and do you have any criteria or standards to say, hey, this program is successful? Do you quantify it? How do you quantify it, or to do the justice to the business?
So DeAnna, I have some thoughts, but I want to pause because I know there's been some conversation around that internally also, as I look over my shoulder.
Yeah. So I can tell you we have had an individual development plan program in place at Goodyear for quite some time now. And we are leveraging that HR process to ensure that each individual in the program has set an observable, measurable goal for themselves before they enter the program that will be tracked and measured when they come out of the program. So every person is coming from a different part of the IT organization with different goals and different work on their plates. And they are to take this learning back to that specific work and apply it. And those applications will be identified before entering the program and tracked and monitored after the program. So we'll measure success on how these changes or these new ways of thinking, new skills that they've gathered have been applied to their specific work.
Yeah, and I maybe just to add to that, many of those key individuals, like DeAnna said, as they're submitting for it, it's the work and the functions that they have, so how they can apply that. So, we have objectives, we have individual development plans. The goal is make sure this is a tangible part of what they're trying to accomplish. And what's great is we have an abundance of opportunities, so it's not hard to find that. But one of the things with any of these types of things, training is always kind of kicked to the wayside or kicked to the curb, or it's the thing you always put off to the last. By making it this level of a commitment and making it part of your objectives, it makes it it holds us as leaders accountable versus just the individual having to try to squeeze in the time. So I think for us, because we've been faced with that challenge, we want to see this be a success, but we've had other runs at these types of things. This is one that we think is unique and different.
Thank you.
Let me add I think it's a great, DeAnna, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to let you guys know there's also a tool out there that we leverage in learning and development from the Advantage Way. That is a skills mapping tool that proves to be very beneficial to individuals. They kind of work backwards from what is the big goal that they want to take on and how does it apply to the work down to the skill level. So that's an exercise that each of our individuals will go through as well.
I think it's a great question. It's a spirit of analytics. How do we identify metrics for a program of this craft nature, and how do we quantify it? We have not reached that fine stage of giving a clean answer because we are in this process of developing, and that certainly is one of the challenges we have to do. And I can tell you what we do in our program. There are three distinct measures or metrics of outcomes that I think are relevant in the real world too. One is based on self-learning. I think the tracking of new way of thinking, new way of tackling problems, and new tools. That is self-driven, and most programs have that self-rating or self-evaluation programs. The second we call critical review. So materials generated as part of this program, there are some project work they will do on a real world problem or real problem in their own division or domain. That analysis, that report generated can be critically reviewed by supervisors and others to see what are the new insights that are built into that, how far have we gone. And then a third, that's true for many of our students here, they say, I got new ways of thinking about problems in the real world. And that's known when they actually go and perform in their role over time. So many of these learnings eventually show up. I think she left the change of culture of the place. And the language is different, the materials presented are different, the complexity which they work with, and then simplify it for implementation. That's a culture that we're talking about. And I think those are hard to miss if the thing is working. But that takes time to develop and imbue. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Hello, very intriguing presentation. Thank you for that. My name's Mark. I'm from Nestle Purina Pet Care Company. We make pet food for a living. Now we're making commercial digital products really built around a foundation of AI that translates a pet's data into insights about a pet's health, predictive health needs. I'm interested from the Goodyear perspective. In my experience at Purina, those people that have elevated themselves as data experts in the organization tend to come from scientific domains in R&D and others, and tend to become super users, expert in a specific system. And we have very rare case do we have a person whose data expertise kind of transcends a system and goes across a life cycle of the data flow. And so I'm interested if this is the case that you experience in Goodyear, and if so, how do you think about training those future data experts, data champions in a way to think, act, behave beyond just data living in a specific systems silo?
No, it's a good and a complex question. Something that we have developed and had launched a number of years ago was a data insights platform. And for us, getting in a little bit into the technical weeds, AWS cloud-based platform, virtual private cloud, and really the ingestion point for a lot of our tire sensors. But one of the things that we wanted to do is build the digital thread, the end-to-end view of our product, from the concept, the virtual design, to the testing, to the build, to basically the sale, and to the field performance of a tire. And one of the things that we have started to recognize is what we're trying to do is build these common platforms. And so IT really took a lot of the lead in working with the data science team to build something that's very capable, very scalable, that really has more guardrails than stringent lanes. So I think we have the guardrails up, but we don't tell people to the point of it's this tool, and this tool. We want to make sure that we're protecting our environment, we're protecting the security of our data, we're making stuff easily searchable and locatable, so a good data catalog, so you can kind of have the treasure map to all the information. And so we also have built some communities of practice. So again, we were chatting beforehand about a very robust community of practice where we've had a lot of success bringing, so we have in Luxembourg in a couple of weeks, basically a couple-day event where we have people across the organization presenting, data scientists, software engineers throughout the organization, tire engineers, on various digital capabilities. And so I think for us, it's trying to encourage a lot of this cross-pollination between the groups, having these groups collaborate together. Same thing with CASE. So we've found some real success in trying to get more adoption by working across those teams, building common capabilities, and finding stuff like this. This framework is very scalable. You could take this right over to R&D and have engineers go hog wild on it, and then off to the races. And here's the thing: in many cases, people will have familiarity with maybe a good chunk of these areas. They may be domain experts in one facet. It's bringing it all together that we're trying to encourage. So what I'll say is we've had success wherever we've made strives to work across functions to bring people together, build common capabilities, and then again, there are still preferences. The blood will be ankle deep if you say, Python versus, but you know what? We're encouraging by saying we have common data engines, or we have our digital tool chain that enables pick what matters the most to you. But try not to have, we have like a common group that looks at what's being brought in and say, we don't need 5, analytics engines. We don't, we have a couple, let's work with this. And if there's something else, is it a unique scenario? Or, because sometimes what ends up happening is a person comes in from an outside organization. Oh, I used this before. Well, they bring it in, they spin it up, they move to another job or they leave the organization, and that's still sitting there and someone else has to support it. So we also try to manage what's being brought in. So it's a complex answer to a question, but hopefully I got to what you were looking for.
Maybe I can add. I think your question is, tell me if this is correct, that the people skilled in data science today tend to have favorites. And they don't have tools or ways of thinking that go across domains. Am I right? Is that the question?
That and just haven't had experience in maybe using other systems in our systems landscape, right? And so haven't developed the ability to understand that there may be common data that exist across a network of systems, right? But we don't have a framework that really teaches people to make those kinds of connections.
Yeah, so in fact, I was showing earlier on how data science was, where it was centered around a domain. Mm-hmm. And you got some other expertise and, it was focused on that. I think now we are moving away from that to be less domain focused, but still have that domain aspect. Mm. And it's going to take some time, but that's where most of the academic programs and in general things are moving.
And last thing to add is maybe this will help tie some of this together. We've added a role, kind of a chief data steward, who is the chief cat herder, to be all intents and purposes, of tying all our complex silo data and creating visibility to it. Because honestly, you described something very accurately. We had a lot of groups that knew their silo information and they had their favorite tool and didn't know 2 groups over that they were doing something similar or solving for the same problem. I think we've spent a lot of time over the last 3-4 years bringing those barriers down and creating that collaboration and nurturing it. But it is very much a curated experience.
I think eventually the tools have a way of settling down too, although data warehouses could differ. But I want to take your question in a slightly different way. That is, most people trained in data science are heavy in tools, whatever they've learned in the program. So I often talk about our program. We recruit students who have to demonstrate high quantitative ability. They have to have a grounding in economics or in computer science or engineering. And by definition, we rule out people who will be in the domain of business. This is a business school now. Because many of them don't meet those criteria. They don't have calculus or they don't have other requirements to get in. And I've been doing analytics for a long time. And what I've discovered is you have to take that talent and give them the sensibilities of listening to the problem before going to the tool. And it's so often they say, give me the data. I have a wonderful tool that can solve it. And I said, no, hold on, just let's listen to the problem. Maybe you don't even have the right data. And recently, and I explored this idea with Goodyear, there's another pathway we have not explored carefully, and that is people trained in psychology, in social sciences, in all those other fields, and training them for analytics. Well, yeah, I understand they don't have the calculus, they don't have the algebra, but can we figure out a way for those who are motivated to do that? And I did some research a bit on that, and I found out that among the minority group, those who go to the undergraduate program to do an engineering or computer science, half of them don't finish there. They go to social sciences, psychology, for different reasons. So these guys are well trained in basically, but they never get into this pathway to get to analytics where jobs are, where money is, where growth is. And we have many schools have blocked the pathway. In my way, it's easier to train them than to train the people who are trained in basic mathematical to think in terms of social, people, human things. It's a challenge. Both ways is a challenge. That's why you saw me draw those two pathways. They need to be together. But there are two pathways. One does not explode. I think that's like a bigger challenge. The world will be terrible if it's run by data scientists. Terrible. Because they'll have no human sensibilities. It will be terrible if it's run by psychologists because they'll make no money. So we've got to find a way to connect, fuse, and make it effective. That is unfinished business. So I think that's the way I would say it.
Thank you for that. And if I might have had one other question. Did you have a comment?
I was just going to add one thing from the L&D perspective. Again, it's not going to be solved within just this program. We have a larger strategy that is also being executed on, and we're standing up what will be our digital academy. There are elements of the digital academy that will provide opportunities for individuals from across different domains and functions to come together and share stories and insights and learn and grow from one another. So there's additional legs besides this program.
Oh, great. I'd love to follow up with you guys a little bit on some of those points.
I can also just give you a tip. Cardinal Health came to us and gave us a preview of what they were doing with their digital academy. They're a little further down the path than we are. So that's another really good resource to reach out to if you're in the middle of trying to stand something like that up.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
One other question on the very last slide. In the framework you presented, you had in one of the boxes on the bottom, see how good my memory is, data visualization and descriptive statistics, and then the next box to the right, you had statistics and machine learning. Can you just articulate a little bit what you view as the difference between statistics in those two boxes?
Yeah, actually, I should have added inferential statistics there.
Okay.
That is for inference. There was not enough space to write that.
Okay, that makes good sense.
Well, we always looked at it was one is looking backwards, one is looking forwards, right?
Yes.
You got to start with looking backwards.
Yes.
And look forwards. Yeah.
Thank you.
So one other just quick question, I guess follow up on the gentleman's comment. I think John, you were talking earlier as well about the glossary, like the common language. One of the things we're finding right now is we spend a lot of time on a data glossary. Right? We kind of scrub our data, we build a data glossary. We have a business glossary which is separate. We're finding more and more that they start to overlap, but it's a different audience, right? So I have the analytics people who need to understand what do these terms mean from a data view. I have other people who need to understand what it means from a business view. And one of our challenges is how do I take those two different perspectives, which you tend to build your business glossary differently from your data glossary. How are you starting to combine those, but still understand the different audiences?
So that another really good and complex question. So we recognize that as a gap, and one of the things that our data engineering and analytics team, basically the next generation of the old enterprise data warehouse, doing a lot of work around a data catalog that really brings those two facets together. So the old school enterprise data warehouse would have had the kind of information of this is the source system and this is the field name and this is the, this is the precision of the metric, and et cetera. And more of the very dry, I don't still know what the field means when the dust settles information, but it's great if you're trying to triage a failure in, an ETL process. I like the term the treasure map. The and to this, however, is that business nomenclature that brings those two things together. One of the things that we're trying to do is to prevent our data lake from becoming a data swamp is ensuring that, listen, you can bring whatever you want into our platform. If you're just throwing into the early S3 buckets and you're just going to go ham on it to do some rough cut stuff, we don't care. The moment, though, it's going to get into, we'll say, more of the curated space, there are some table stakes that we're asking that provides that, what is this? And in the language that a person can parse and understand easily. So for us, it's been trying to find that. And again, you don't quite find tools to do it that way. And so we're on it. The team's been kind of building up a framework that says we think this is going to meet our needs and get it going. And going back to that chief data steward role, distinctly interested in that. And I will say that, again, when you talk about master data, most people's eyes glaze over. Our recent integrations are really demonstrating to the business how critical it is. And so now people are like, well, I guess I've heard you say it for a while, but boy, this really is important. And we're like, yes. So that's how we're approaching it right now. And we could have a whole little different session on that, on where we're at with that data catalog, but it's finally getting both halves of the equation, which is before we weren't doing that.
Oh, you have a question.
So my name is Ann Morella. I'm from Avery Dennison here in Cleveland. Just had a question. So love the process, love the product that you have at the end. Would be curious to see, what did you have to compromise and give up along the way that maybe the team wanted, but you couldn't influence through the data or through the insights what the business was ready to have appetite for?
So I guess if you're describing, and make sure I'm answering the question correctly, if you're describing the framework of the course that we're developing
Yes.
with CASE, we gave up probably 300 hours worth of material that we wanted to cover. So, we started, and actually CASE came back with a very robust framework, and we're like, yeah, it's got to be smaller. And then when you get down to the individual courses, and we're like, oh man, how are you going to cover all that in 8 hours? Can we steal 2 hours? We're trying to scale it appropriately. And so 100 to 120 hours of stuff over the course of, this is huge. I mean, for us, it's like, that's a lot. And I mean, DeAnna, am I wrong in saying that?
No, it's definitely true. I can tell you one of the exercises that we went through was understanding what we didn't want to build and taking a good look at the fact that we already have a community of data scientists who have a specific role in the organization, and clearly, doing a side-by-side layout of this is the job of the data scientist, but this is the data champion, and what are the differences between the two to make sure that we're not overlapping and creating a program that's going to build more data scientists. That's something that probably should be happening in the university and then on the job with experience, not in the corporate training program.
So yeah, we went through that kind of skinnying down, and then we had a much more robust offering. And again, for us, it's just how do we just make it fit something that we think that we can get people through and still hits all the key things. And a lot of this, we firmly believe in, on-the-job training. So, it's not that you come out, it's that you're doing this in conjunction with, and that we're finding the right projects and assignments that are giving you the opportunity to leverage these experiences. But yeah, there was a lot of hard choices, and we'll still be skinning it down. Not skinning it down, but tinkering with it as we get into the details of the courses, which is really cool.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's time to close and thank the audience for being here. And we are here if you have any follow-up questions individually. But thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.